Okay, so lots of things to add in from part one. So I'll have a bit of a chit chat on that. A few other things have been going on. So okay, so there's been so many theories about where these UFOs, UAPs come from, what the entity's motivations are. Lots of things. I mean, you probably fill a couple of books or a few hours. I'm just going to try and crush it down to like something that's easily digestible, in a couple of hours, because people don't have time to be sitting down like all day, pretty much. Things that are going on. Now, let's start with all this disclosure thing, because that's sort of the hottest thing right at the moment. So they're trying to imply that they're not aliens. Well, that's true, but they're trying to imply interdimensional beings. Now let's talk about dimensions and quantum physics and stuff like that. Experiences and people that are not versed properly in science throw quantum theory about as if it's the be-all and end-all solution to their problems with this experience and the scientific absurdities. Now, like walking through walls and all the rest of this. Now, basically debunk that, and people need to get help for that if they're finding that they think they can do this sort of thing. Right, it's either an out-of-body experience, which can be caused by severe sleep apnea, which can kill people. Right, that thing can actually kill you. Right, it's not a joke. And the thing is, you don't have to suffer. So why put yourself through it? All right. People should not be enabling mental illness. Okay, in some cases, they should not be enabling it. They should be encouraging the person to be seeking help and getting help. There's also forms of epilepsy that can cause so-called experiences. And again, I think if anybody does have an experience, I think the best thing to do is to get yourself checked right out, like have brain scans, get tested for epilepsy, sleep disorders, all those kinds of things, like eye defects, even everything. Get a good once over by the doctors and see if something comes off that. Now, if they say that it is something, then you should be following their plan and doing what they're basically telling you to do. Now, I'm not a doctor, but you don't have to be a doctor to know that if somebody says that they can walk through walls, or they can fly, or they can do something magical, they're probably either lying to you or they're delusional. Right? So let's not entertain hoaxes. Let's not enable people to be suffering any more from mental illness than they have to. Okay? So let's talk about quantum mechanics. Now, quantum mechanics was developed in, I think, the 1930s as Heisenberg and a few other prominent scientists of the time. So, it tries to, how would you say, explain the extremely small, like beyond subatomic particles. Now, it essentially says that there's energy and there's fluctuations in the vacuum, like waves that go up and down. Right? There's zeros and ones, kind of that kind of thing. So, and like virtual particles and stuff like that. You can find some really good stuff online, like there's Astro Kobe, there's History of the Earth and History of the Universe are really excellent resources. So there's Event Horizon, John Godier. There's quite a few. If you look around on YouTube, if you know where to look, then essentially you're pretty much fine. There's PBS, Space Time, which is really good. That explains quantum theory in a lot more detail right now. But basically, dimensions are in quantum theory are basically very small things that curl up and provide the structure to the universe. They're not some magical place you go after you die or some other realm. That's other universes. Right? Dimensions and a parallel universe are two different things. A lot of people conflate the two. Okay? So dimensions we know in geometry are like, say, length, width, and depth, which is the 3 dimensions. And in relativity, time is also a dimension. That's a forward-flowing one-way dimension. And as far as we know, can't be reversed without some major modifications or things going on. Okay, so dimensions are extremely small, even smaller than Planck length. Now, Planck length is a super, super, super tiny measurement. It is basically you have a 0 and you have a 33 zeros before you get to a 1. That's how tiny it is. Extremely tiny. An atom could not pass through it. And the energy in which to rip space-time to access another universe would be extremely high. It would be essentially pretty much another Big Bang. Now, as far as we know, we've not seen another Big Bang since the one 13.8 billion years ago. Okay? So they're all intents and purposes unreachable if parallel or other universes exist. Okay? They're saying essentially out there in the universe, they believe there are 8 copies of each of us. So that's a rather interesting thing, but whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it has been said in the scientific books. So, but, you know, that's statistics and chance and all the rest of that. It'd be extremely unlikely we'd ever meet our other selves. We could be living completely different lives. We could be making different choices and all the rest of that. Now, no parallel universe required. But others say, well, the universe branches off with every decision you make. Right? One movement can affect everything else. In one universe, you never existed. In this one, you did. One universe, you never had an accident. In this one, you did. You know, or they talk about grandfather paradoxes. Now, the grandfather paradox could be solved by the fact if you go back and kill your grandfather. But technically, you still could exist if you kill the grandfather after your father's been conceived. Go back to a time after your father's born. That could potentially solve that issue. So there's that. There are ways around things. But dimensions and interdimensional theories are just that at the moment, just theories. They've not been proven with any kind of experimental evidence. So as great as this hypothesis is, we may have to leave that idea go. Okay? We really need to. Because it's really not helping solve the mystery as to what the UFO, UAP phenomenon actually is. And it's really important to remember that. Now, out-of-body experiences can be caused by trauma, fright, severe sleep, central apnea, and all the rest of this kind of thing, and certain forms of epilepsy. Alice in Wonderland syndrome, which is parietal lobe epilepsy. There's frontal and temporal lobe epilepsy that cause disassociation and different things as well. Now, it's not the fault of these people that suffer these things, but on the same token, we need to not enable delusional thinking or people that are clearly not right. Now, on the other hand, we have genuine people that have experienced things. They've got witnesses, they've got photographs, they have film, and the rest of that are pretty, there's a strong case for something going on. Now, there could be injuries, there could be different bits and pieces, but again, rule out mundane issues first before you say, yes, that's extraordinary. We really need to have a methodical, step-by-step way of working out what is what, because even if, like Betty Hill is anywhere remotely right, 91% of abductions and so-called contact has some kind of mundane explanation, whether it be mentally ill, hoaxing, or rare diseases of the brain. And the other 9%, well, okay. So let's focus on them for a little bit. Okay. I mean, there's so much to try and get through, but I'll try my best to sort of crush it down to something. I'm speaking sort of fairly, like simply so, the general public can understand what is going on. Okay, so we explained, like in the last video, about the walking through walls and why that is impossible. Now, I know that people might argue, oh, but, didn't they say faster than light was impossible? Well, not really. The idea that, faster than light travel kind of comes from Einstein's special theory of relativity. Now, 8 years after Einstein died, there was called, I think it was, not Alexander, I think it was John Bell and some other scientist. I can't think of his name offhand. I'll probably think of it later. But anyway, in any case, there's something called the Bell theorem. And it essentially negated his idea of faster than light travel. Meaning that, and that experiment was quantum entanglement. Now, quantum entanglement means that essentially you have two particles. Just say this is what they say. So, right, one particle spins up, the other particle spins down. There are two directions in which they can spin, either one or the other. Now, if you say look at one particle and you know that it spins up, you know immediately the other particle, the paired particle, is spinning down. Right, so that information instantly knows what the other is doing. So essentially what that means is you can know something instantly under certain circumstances. And people need to remember that special relativity, it's in the name, special. In mathematics, special means under certain circumstances. It does not mean all circumstances. That's what people need to remember. Now we have algebraic drive coming to the fore, and from what I learned from the Greys themselves and other people that have experienced the Greys have been shown certain ideas that we have, but we've not applied to spaceflight. I think that's pretty much all it is. Now, I got the impression that they surf space-time itself. So they basically ride space like a wave. Now, space itself is travelling faster than light. So you basically sit on something and like sit on the wave and you basically surf it. You're on the shore pretty quickly, say, your destination point. Now, they also implied the Casimir effect and basically, what do they call those spinning things? Gyroscopes and something to do with black holes. So whether they use a combination or something thereof, I think it's something where we should start to be looking. And I was watching a tear in the sky the other day, and they reckon when they detected the UAPs that they had no heat signature and it was quite cold, like as in minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit or about minus 45 degrees Celsius. Now I use Celsius and metric system, so even though I say 6 foot or whatever, then I'll translate it to, but it's just the way it kind of is, right? So it occurred to me that superconductors could also be involved in this as well. Superconductors are very cold, but it also means there's no friction. No friction means no inertia. Right, that's simple physics. They're not actually breaking the laws of physics, they're actually applying different physical laws to actually travel, not by breaking them. There's a big difference. Well, that's my impression. I could be wrong, and I will also that I'm open to to be corrected and to learn new things and stuff. But from what I've seen and what other people have mentioned about their experiences, and I know that instinctively, yes, they're telling the truth, then yes, I would say, okay. Excuse me. So, there's that. Now, let's go back to the disclosure thing for a little bit, okay? Like learning a little bit more about things. I still think that something is, excuse me, awfully wrong with these stories. Something is not sitting right, something is not ringing true. Now, I will give Grush his due when he mentioned something that people were getting murdered because they saw UFOs or something like that, and then all the other things that I thought that was interesting that was also said to me too. But back in 1989, they told me that I had to keep quiet about my experience because they were scared that I was going to be harmed by humans because I knew too much. And that they said that people got murdered because they saw them. Now, my brother-in-law, his father was in the Air Force, and he told me about Roswell. Now, I have a different opinion about Roswell. Apparently, the writing on the craft turned out to be Greek word for freedom. It would be very unlikely that really super thin metal would be traveling in space. Foil would not be traveling in space. And also balsa wood, I think it would be quite unlikely that another planet, even another colony of humans, would be having such things on their world, because cultures and everything vary so much. It would be very difficult to think. Now, as for the so-called dead bodies, I noticed something. It was completely unrelated, but I was looking at the history of sightings around the world and how the greys seem to appear on like cave paintings, drawings, and sculptures over the centuries, over the thousands of years since we've been like a species. It was very interesting that the Aztecs depicted the greys as their gods. Now, I can see where Van Deniken is coming from in some respects, but I think he is turning every ancient artifact into something from outer space, which is not really good. And there was apparently evidence of the manufacturing evidence to support and bolster their idea, which you shouldn't have to do that. I've never manufactured evidence, and I've never faked any photos or film either, though I got accused of it, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But the important point is, I think a lot of this whole thing has been open to a lot of interpretation, and it could be the fact that we just don't understand the universe and our world as much as we think we do. Now, that's okay, but we need to kind of like step up our game a little bit and start learning things and recognize that hypotheses and theories, for the most part, not gravity and evolution, they're fact. We know that, right? The earth is round, right? The earth goes around the sun. We know those basic facts. But in some cases, like say string theory and all the rest of that, some of them are not 100% proven by experimentation or any other like hard evidence. And we need to recognize when a theory or more accurately a hypothesis is a good one or a bad one to explain something. Hypotheses and theories exist to explain the world. Religion did that for us for the most part until science came along, right? It replaced it. Do I believe science and religion should coexist? Absolutely bloody not. Because it's just a very bad idea, right? Because people are too anxious to prove their doctrine is true and, label it with science and say, oh, science proves it, and when there was nothing of the sort. Okay? It's really important that we may remain free of biases as much as possible. Now, if we can barely understand how these craft move and work and stuff, we really have no business trying to jump the gun and say, oh, they're interdimensional, or they're this or they're that, or something like that, when we have no clue as to what we're even looking at. Right? Apparently there's metamaterials and different things like that. Now, Alien Scientist on YouTube is really good. He's got some good stuff that's, you know, that touches on the subject more in depth than I could ever try and explain. I'll try and explain it simply from what I understand, but like I said, I am not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, but from what I understand, and I've done a lot of, not just on YouTube, but I've done a lot of research on other sources, like the really good sources like eMedicine, Physics Journal, Nature, all those kinds of scientific journals. I read them for basically breakfast, pretty much. But the important thing is we need to look at the broader picture and see what is going on. Sometimes you have to hone in on some details and learn some new things, and sometimes unexpected things can fit in other places as well. But it is really important not to just say, get too carried away and with things. Speculation is good to a degree, but recognize that you could be wrong about things. We all make mistakes, we all make assumptions, and sometimes they're wrong. Like the same carry on, oh, that they're demons. And I mean, we're talking about, elected officials believing in screaming that the UFOs are demons. I mean, for goodness sakes, buzz off for that nonsense. That's nonsense. That's absolute garbage. Right? Not one person has ever taken a photograph of a demon or of God or any myriad of gods that they reckon exist, or angels, right? It's, they say, oh, what about ghosts? Well, ghosts are probably just camera defects most of the time. I mean, even some of these so-called orbs that people reckon, they say are floating around, they're probably just dust particles and the camera's out of focus most of the time. And this is why when I film something myself, right, I say I've got this on Zoom, I'm zooming back out, I'm zooming in, so that I'm actually doing that. So if there's any issue, you can see it for yourself, right? That's why I say where I do the observations, I say I'm looking up, I'm looking north, I'm looking south, east, west, or whatever, 60 degrees elevation, all the rest of that sort of thing. So you know what the hell I'm doing. If I say I'm holding the camera still, I'm holding the camera still. If I say that I'm moving it, even if I move it accidentally, I say, oh, sorry, I've moved it. So you know exactly what is happening basically in real time. So you can essentially, it'd be like essentially standing next to me and seeing the whole thing for yourself. And I'll say what I suspect. If it's, sometimes we've seen a couple of things. I say, what's this? Is this a plane? Is this a helicopter? And you say, wait and see what happens. Right? And then some of them are planes, some of them are helicopters or whatever. But other times, they behave in very strange ways that you can't account for. So we know that we've got a UAP on our hands. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean I believe all of them are aliens from another planet. No, all it means is it could be some atmospheric phenomenon, could be anything. Could be newfangled drones. Who knows? But the important thing is that we keep an open mind about things, right? And that, skeptics have been demonized. Oh, they're terrible people, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes they do speak the truth. And we need to consider different things, right? Say, go through the list of all the mundane causes, right? You right? Just say, right? You can test if somebody's mentally ill. You can test somebody for epilepsy. You can test somebody for a sleep disorder. You can test your camera for defects. You can test a person's eyesight to see if their eyesight is good. Okay? You can test all that, right? My hypothesis I have about the Greys being the Neanderthals. Now, people have said, oh, but how did you come up with that conclusion? Well, all right, well, let's have a look. Let's have a look at the ET hypothesis and what it doesn't explain. Right, so the hypothesis is that these entities are aliens from another planet. Okay, so far, we have not ever found a planet that's similar to Earth with air pressure and air composition of nitrogen and oxygen with any other planet anywhere in the known universe at the moment. It may change. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I'm going to say it's unlikely, right? Every planet in the solar system has a different air pressure and chemical admixture. You've got, like, say, Jupiter, methane, ammonia, hydrogen, a little bit of helium, blah, blah. Right? We could not live there. We can't live on Venus, which is, the planet next door. We can't live on Mercury. It's too bloody hot, too deadly radiation. Okay? And they're saying, oh, but we downed the sources. Well, no, because space itself, that would be much more dangerous to them to travel in space. They've got higher radiation. They have faster projectiles, all the rest of that. Why would a craft from another world that's travelled light years, faster than light in some cases, or whatever, all of a sudden crash on Earth? It makes no sense. So I'm saying bullshit. Now, what a lot of people don't know is when I applied to go to the military, I was going to join the Air Force, but I got stopped because of my eyesight and my heart defect. But I got to learn a little bit of the lingo. Now, alien in military speak is another word for an adversary or the enemy or something unknown. So alien craft could actually mean anything. Not necessarily an ET civilization from another planet. You need to bear a lot of this stuff in mind. So that's two issues already with the ET hypothesis. Thirdly, most important one, people are claiming that the entities of all sorts, not just the Greys, but all sorts, are crossbreeding with us humans. Why us? Why not the chimpanzees or other species that would more closely look like them? Say, for example, the reptiles. Why don't they crossbreed with a lizard? Like, say, a giant lizard or something like that. Why us? Because, as I said, a reptilian, for the most part, lays eggs. There are very few reptile species that do give birth to live young, but they go off and she never sees them again, pretty much. She basically leaves them to fend for themselves. Okay? Now, an intelligent race like us and of other species that show intelligence, ballistic movement and all the rest of that, they have to have a childhood with the parent, be it the mother or the father. And it's important to remember that, right? Because humans have the longest childhood of any species. right? Because we are hyper intelligent and technological. Okay? So a reptilian, given that it's so big, right, its body is massive, right? So would his bits and reproductive bits, right? How do you know that they're actually going to fit? Same with these mantids being, and some saying, oh, the greys have no genitals. Well, that's a load of crap. Oh, they don't eat, or they're chlorophyll, or they uh, absorb sunlight like a plant does, or something. That is an absolute load of crap. Why would they need mouths and noses? And then you have to account for the people that are saying, oh, they've had made love to them, forced or otherwise. So how do you work that out? Someone is not telling the truth. They either have genitals or they don't. How do they reproduce? If they reproduce by cloning, what's the use of coming all these light years to come and grab us in the middle of the night and say and do this? It makes no sense, right? If they're aliens, because again, their genetics would not line up to us. Even convergent evolution doesn't cut it. That's what people need to realise. The next thing, which right? So that's the other thing. Right, now, go back to air pressure for a little bit. Okay, so, right, a spacecraft in space, we know space is a vacuum. We have, like on our space shuttle, we have an airlock. We have different kind of things to ensure the air doesn't escape. The important thing is, when people are allegedly taken, they don't undergo any decompression chamber thing. When we go underwater, right, we go 100, say 10 meters down, right, the water upon us increases by 1 atmosphere. Now, we all know what happened to the Titan sub, where it just squished under all that pressure. It just popped like a soda can and boom, that's it. They wouldn't have known what hit them. Right, very dangerous what they did, and, wasted everybody's time searching for them when they chose to go down that deep when it was not designed to do so. Right? And hopefully they get, justice coming to them, hopefully. Because that wasn't right what they did there. So, the same would be for another alien species. If their atmosphere is denser, say 5 times denser, we would need decompression. Right? If the air pressure is to, say, light in their spacecraft, we would have asphyxia, we would suffocate. So, it is within the realms of, say, 5 to half an atmosphere. Okay? I mean, generally, if you go diving, right, there's certain, like, decompression stops where you must stay for a certain time at a certain level under the water. You can't just go straight up because you'll die from the bends. The bends is a terrible way to go. You basically seize up and you drown. Okay? And why do they basically walk in and out of the craft like it's nothing? People need to think about these things, because it just shows people are not thinking. They're making all these claims and all the rest of that. And look, in some cases, it may well be. but it implies, by those 4 points alone, that they're not aliens. They don't come from another dimension, because we've discussed that. So we can scrub that off the table. Some people are saying, oh, they come from the future. We don't know whether time travel back in time is possible. We know that time flows forward. You cannot go back. There's some people are saying the time loop, but again, it is a forward thing. You cannot go back in time that we know of. Okay, so that leaves two options. Now I know people say, "Oh, but what if they're demons and we're angels?" Okay, I'll say a few things. I do not believe in the Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, or any other holy book touted by humans, because each and every single one of them has scientific absurdity that we can prove that is not true. This religion BS should have stopped when Copernicus confirmed that the earth revolved around the sun. That's how long ago religion should have died off. But people are stupid and believe what they want to believe and continue believing in the face of evidence. And it needs to stop. If we're going to get anywhere, helping our planet, helping each other, religion needs to go. Aside from the moral standpoint, right? They're saying, oh, but he's God, he can do what he wants. Well, all right then. He says about killing, about stealing, and all the rest of that. But he himself basically broke every commandment himself. Every single one of them. He requires worship. That's gluttony. He lusted, or basically took somebody else's wife. That's lust and adultery. Right? He told people to steal things from other countries. That's theft. Right? He drowned the whole world, or apparently, according to the stories, because he got pissed off over somebody eating an apple. If he created everything, he created the devil and sin and death. And only he can undo it. He's chosen not to, so he either is evil or he doesn't exist. And it's just a made-up story because we couldn't understand shit from sugar, as my mama used to say. And take that for what you will. There is no evidence of a deity that spoke to us and basically got all the science right and all the morals right. It is immoral to own another person. It is immoral to order a rape victim to marry her rapist. And that right there, my friends, is why I do not believe in religion. And if people had standards and common sense, they wouldn't believe it in it either. Because all the churches want is your money and control of you. They control your sex life. They have control of you completely. We're fearing the wrong species. They're saying, oh, but what if the aliens control us? No. If you're in religion, you are being controlled, whether you like it or not. People may not like me for that, but it's the truth. Hard as it is, and, people say, oh, you're being too hard and all the rest of that. Well, sometimes you have to be. Not out of malice or being nasty and all the rest of that. Too many of these religious zealots have too much say over people and who they can go with, who they can love, and all the rest of that, and who they can be friends with. That's coercion and that's control. But let's go back to this other thing. So we've sorted out a few things against the ET hypothesis. Now, we know from science, in archaeology especially, and DNA sampling, that humans and Neanderthals once interbred. Most people of European descent usually have anywhere between 1% to 4% DNA from the Neanderthals, Asians, and Australian Aboriginals have Denisovian DNA in them. I think it's about 3% or something, similar sort of thing. Now, we also know in Siberia that Neanderthals and the Denisovians also mixed and hybridized. We know that from fossil records. But what if the Neanderthals and maybe the Denisovians never went extinct? I began to realize that they must be closely related to us. And I thought, well, if a Neoteny species, which is a daughter species, which can cross back with the parent species, because we mentioned in the last video about the 12-week fetus looking like a grey. A neoteny will stop developing at a certain stage of its evolution, but it will continue growing in other respects, including their reproductive ability. We are an example of a neotenous chimpanzee. Right, on our chromosome 2, our chromosome 2 has fused together and a little section has flipped over, essentially. Right? It's a mutation. The orangutans, the chimpanzees, and the gorillas, on their chromosome 2, there's chromosome 2 a split in two. Okay, so that means that we can't crossbreed with them. Now, if we can't crossbreed with our closest related species to us, then it's going to be nigh on impossible for aliens from another planet that's independently evolved to reproduce with us, period. Now, I'm afraid that cuts out a good percentage of people that claim this experience. Not all of them, but most of them. Right? We can flick off the reptilians, the Nordics too, or unless, like I said, they're a breakaway civilization and they're hybrids with the Greys and us somewhere down the line. Further back in time, maybe the program was instigated maybe a few centuries ago or a few thousand years ago. Okay, that's one possibility. But given the fact that they're not telling people where they're actually from, say Mars, Venus, blah, blah, Arcturus, and all the rest of these suns that are way too hot. Sirius, another one. That's way too hot. That's a white sun. It's too hot for life as we know it. They couldn't live. Even robotics couldn't withstand the hard radiation. Right? Arcturus is 200 times and shining about 2,000 times brightness of the sun. It would blind you and fry you if you got anywhere near it. So again, be wary. Look, I did mention something like, I wonder if it is like what do you call it? The pronunciation when they say where they're from, and we could be mistaking it for something else when it's not. I did that once, and I think that's a possibility in some cases. So again, we really, really need to think about what we're saying with these experiences. So it actually implies that they are another type of human. Okay, and that's how the crossbreeding would work, because everything would line up. If they're from Earth and originally, they'd have the same air composition, the same air pressure. They would be able to crossbreed. They'll be able to, walk in and out of this craft like we do with our aircraft. Right? That all of a sudden everything starts lining up because they don't wear a spacesuit or a gas tank, and we don't have to do it for them either. So that right there implies a connection with us, a very close connection. And that's what the churches and all that are frightened of. They realise that it's not what the Bible and all these other books say. They lose money, they lose wealth, they lose power, they lose control. And that's what the cover-up has always been about. Maintaining the status quo. That's all.